Hello and good morning. Today we just have a pretty common and simple job. We are going to do timing belt work on a 3.4 liter Toyota. So this is a nice and clean rig. Customer ended up with this rig after he hit ice one day. So sometimes it's one of those things where you end up with something nicer than what you had. You got to deal with a little trauma once in a while. So this is a low mile truck. It's got about 177,000 on it. Customer went and got all Toyota bits. So we're gonna get started on this. Basically, I didn't really do anything other than drop the skid guard and drop the coolant out of the way. And you can see this has got the aftermarket bumper on it. So until I clean over the bumper, it's gonna be kind of gay. Not as gay as doing my truck. I'm gonna have to take the wheels off and lower it. What I'm gonna do is just gonna be kind of an elementary. I just kind of want to show you how to go through all this. This particular job, at least in my opinion, is one of the simpler timing belt jobs, I think. It's pretty well exposed. It's not a front wheel drive, which makes these jobs suck. And yeah, even though it's almost identical, I like doing these. This is better than even doing a 3 liter. So we're gonna go ahead and get started here. The first step is just gonna be to get the drive belts off, and we'll get going with that here. Went ahead and dumped the coolant. So first things first is we'll just get this upper radiator hose out of the way, and that way, when we're down in the valley right there, it's one less thing in our way there. As far as tools go, the set of snap-on tools, these, what is this called? The XD HF tools. I like these because they're straight. I bought them specifically to do accessory stuff on the front of motors like this. Some of these, especially with Toyota, they're just really tight, and with an angled tool it will want to slip off of there. Okay, so what we're going to do right here is I'll show you here real quick. This is your pivot bolt. You want to get that one loose. Down behind here is actually the driver release here. So you want to loosen this bolt up, and then you can see the threaded rod behind that is the actual tensioner driver. Tensioner bolt, tensioner driver, whatever you want to call it. So you free that one up, and this other one doesn't necessarily need to be freed up, but I may end up getting it out of the way here anyway. Righty then. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to reach down there and show you where that other bolt is. Either way, ratcheting wrench, I'll reach down there and get that bolt out of there and get that belt off. All right, so we're down here. May as well show you where that other bolt is. So this is where that other tensioner is. It kind of sucks. It's behind these lines. You can't necessarily see it. While we're down here, I figured we may as well knock out the AC idler. So you want to undo the face bolt here. Seriously. Loose that guy up, and then that one's down there. Breakaway's a 14, the adjuster's a 14. This can actually be gotten out from the top. I've done it that way before when I didn't want to fight with the skid guard. And the thing I always forget about when I'm down here doing this is my truck is stripped. I threw away all the bullshit that doesn't need to be on there. So working on a stock vehicle, quote unquote stock vehicle, brings the suck sometimes. Okay, well, we're down here. We may as well get the alternator stuff. Let's see, where is it? All right, so right there is the tensioner adjuster bolt right here. Normally you can back this one up a little bit, just kick it up over the sticking up over the bracket right there. All right, so now the belts are all out of the way. And next is going to be able to get the fan clutch off, and we'll start tearing into the timing cover. I suppose it probably works all right to loosen these up with the belts on there. Otherwise, you just want to get a little pry bar down in here to hold it while you break these loose. These are a 12mm head. Again, this tool works awesome for this. All right, so belts are all off. The fan's out. The fan pulleys are out. Next, we're going to get the upper timing cover off, which is pretty straightforward. Go ahead and get the clips off, and then you just got bolts. You see the bolts there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's one tucked right here. You see that? There's one tucked underneath here, and the same thing, there's one tucked underneath here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get those out. We'll get the cam sensor unplugged and off of the cover, and then that'll be that. These lowers take a little bit of a reach, so just grab a little extension and get in there and get these guys off. And I could use power tools, I guess. I just kind of don't like to in some of these situations. If you're a newbie, I really think that you should be using hand tools. It takes breaking a few bolts to learn kind of what the torque spec is. So this job would be easier. I need to just buy a quarter drive air ratchet. That would be super handy. And typically when you're working on accessories like this kind of stuff, like plastic covers, all these little bolts, if you're working with like a 10 or 12mm head bolt, I just kind of recommend you work with quarter drive stuff. You know, sometimes that's not the way it goes, but so if you're a newbie and you're not super familiar with what's going on, you want to use a tool that is going to kind of keep you from breaking things. So you just want to unclip that clip and just push it through from the back to the front. And then we have everything. So next step is to get the idler off. There are 3 bolts. This one down here, that's the power steering pump bolt. This guy here. God damn. Whoever in here was last was a friggin' animal. Alright, so this power steering bracket nut, both of the nuts have to come off. That way I can get this other sub brackets clear. Now this guy Okay, so now that they're this deep, the next step is going to be to crank pulley off, but we want to pull the motor up to top dead center first. Looks like we're almost there. Nice. All right, so down on the top of that crank gear, you're probably not going to be able to see it, but there is a little dot. It's basically pointing like right at 12 o'clock. And then there's a little pointer on the cover back there. And then on the cams, of course, we have the cam tab lines up here. Same on this side, lines up here. Okay. When you're doing timing, the cams will only TDC in the right spot. Okay. The crank goes over 2 times, the cams only turn over 1 time. So if the cams are at TDC, your crank is likely at TDC. That's the only thing that's going to happen here. So now what's going to go on is I'm going to go ahead and get the crank bolt off, get the crank pulley off, and then I can get that lower timing cover off, and then we can start tearing this the rest of the way down. Okay, I got the pulley off. It did require me to go to the trouble of putting a puller on there to pull it like 1/8 of an inch, and then it fell off, of course. So the other thing I ended up coming against this guy, someone had Loctited the crank pulley. Not really sure what the thought process is there, but not necessary. All right, so again, down here, there is a piece of hardware underneath that. There is a piece of hardware right there. Look up, piece of hardware there. And then there's one that's centered underneath of all this. You kind of can't get a hardware on there. Anyway, guy at the dealer, you just hit this with a punch and knock that out of the way. Otherwise, just take off these 2 bolts right here. There's one here and there's one here. And move this wire bracket out of the way. So anyway, I'm going to get that lower cover off. Now that the crank's off, and we can continue going. All right. There's another bolt in this cover. I guess this one has 4. For some reason, I always think it has 3. Maybe the 3-liter cover only has 3. Okay, so now I'm just going to take the belt off. And that is pretty much that. We will get that tensioner up out of there, and then we will get the cam covers off, and get the cam pulleys off. Need to do a cam job. So what I ended up doing here is, where we left off. The belt is out, the tensioner is out, and so a little secret I didn't show you, I found it online. So the last like however many of these I've done, I had to take the AC pump off and get that shit out of the way to get to the other tensioner bracket, or the other tensioner bolt. Google, I don't know if you've heard of Google, but it's this awesome thing on the computer. You can go online and you can type stuff into it, and then it will tell you all kinds of amazing shit, because there's almost nothing in this life that you're thinking about doing that someone hasn't already done. Okay? I hate Google, but for God's sake, there's so much good information on there. Just frigging use it. Anyway, the Google says you can fish a tool up in there and get that back bolt. And it's pretty tight. Unfortunately, I've been dealing with a Loctite idiot on this job. But you can fish a 1/4 inch tool up in there and get that bolt out. Get the tensioner out without messing with the AC pump. So going back in might suck a little bit, but anyway, so the step that I'm at now is cam and crank seals. I have to get the cam pulleys off. I don't have the tool. What I have been using, or what I've used this tool 1 or 2 times. And then the last couple times I tried to use it, I can't use it. It's just, I don't know. Honestly, this is a piece of shit. I've used it successfully a handful of times, and the rest of the time it just sucks. It slips out of the deal. It's just a pain in the dickhole to use. My buddy who does an ass load of these motors just told me he doesn't have the tool. So I built a tool. Well, I didn't build a tool. I built a tool adapter. I don't know if I've showed you this tool before. This is what's called a chain wrench. And what that does is you wrap it around to hold the pulley. Like in this automatic, for example, to go to take the crank pulley off, Can't get an air gun on there, so you have to hold the pulley. Put that chain wrench on there, it will hold the pulley, and then you can use your breaker bar to get it off. So these pulleys have the star pattern in here, and you can see where I've been dinging this pulley up with my tool. Doesn't want to come off. So what I did was took a piece of the old timing belt, I cut it so it's the same size as that pulley. Now I can use my chain wrench without damaging the pulley. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. And the reason I'm doing this is because obviously that chain wrench is a chain, and I don't want to damage the actual pulley itself. Jesus Christ, that was so much easier. No. So these pulleys are left and right specific. Do not mix them up. I will show you what makes them specific. What makes these two cams different is this little tab right here. This is your cam position tang. This side, you notice, doesn't have one. So, and I guess they're marked left and right. What can go on with these motors is, because the cam sensor is only camming off this one side, you could potentially have this side out of sync. We'll talk about that more when it goes back together, but it is important that the cams get synced up properly. So now I'm going to take out these other 5 bolts, and we'll get that cam cover off, and then we'll be ready to get the seals in. Basically down, I got to do the water pump still, but I got the cam seals out. Cam and crank seals are out. And the crank seals down there. So you just want to dig those out of there with a seal puller or whatever. Just be careful you don't ding up the seal surface. That is your cam seal. That is your crank seal. I'm going to go ahead and get those back in. So here we go. Alright, so I recommend putting a little bit of lube on the lip seal. And then you want to just work it up over the cam here. Grab the appropriate socket. And is down. And repeat side 2. This is a 38mm socket, if you're wondering. Alrighty then. Okay. All right, so now we're going to work the water pump off. So the last guy that was here was a monster. If I didn't know better, I'd say that the last guy that was here was Toyota. And this, if it weren't for the Loctite, I'd say this job wasn't even actually done last time. So I did pull off a Toyota belt. This is a Toyota water pump. So that's good at least. I should not get a shitload on the floor. All right, so 3/4 thermostat. The jiggle valve goes down. I'm not sure what's up with that. You'd think it would go up so the air could go by, but anyway, jiggle valve goes down. So let's get that guy in. Divers go down. Hooker. Go. Alrighty, so water pump's on, the timing backing plate goes on, all the hardware goes on here. I don't have the cam sensor back in here. That bolt broke off, unfortunately. And so we'll get the cam sensor back in there and get the cam pulleys on. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put the tensioner back in. This was a little bit of a pain. Normally on these jobs, the whole tensioner thing kind of sucks because the AC bracket's in the way. Yeah, normally the AC bracket comes out, and I was able to figure out how to get this out this way. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this guy back in the same way. All right, so just up in that slot, you can see that bolt head back there. It's probably super shitty, but anyway, that's the bolt head So you can skinny the tool up in there and get it. That other bolt head is available from the front, so not a big deal. But you can indeed pull that tensioner without pulling the AC bracket. So nice to know. All right, one thing I want to touch on this tensioner. So you've got this hex bolt that runs through and holds this to the front of the block. On the back side, it's got this. There's also this washer. I always forget that's there. So don't forget that's there. And if you didn't see it, it's there somewhere. Go find it. And in the... Why is it so hard to just build apart? Here's the tensioner bracket I took off. This is cranked down. That washer's back there. Now wait for the new part. All right, this is the new bracket. It's fucking locked down. So yeah. Ask your flat rate friend why they're angry all the time. I don't know if you can see that or not. This is visually a different size than this piece. And so what that does is, this is a shouldered bolt. Okay, it has to be able to screw in there, and there needs to be able to stop, and that needs to be able to play on this still. This one runs all the way in. And because there's that little relief there, it's just jamming this into the block and it won't work. So, try again. And this may be a telltale. Right here, this is like a factory marking. Notice there's no marking here, it's just casting. And the other thing I noticed, this has got like bushings just at the end of it. The bushings are just at the end of this style, where these ones are almost all the way through. You can see that collar basically goes all the way through. You can see just that little break there. This one just has sleeves on the end. So try again. I just swap the bearing and we'll move on with our lives. All right, that's what that should look like. Now, bolts locked down, it's all nice and tight. So we saw that tensioner thing, and that was just an absolute no-go. I don't know what's up with that. So I ended up pulling out the timing belt next, because that's about the step where we were at. And although these parts all came marked with Toyota tags, they are definitely a little bit sus. And I'm just... Basically what went on is this timing belt came out of the bag. It is not marked. It's not marked properly, at least in my opinion. Typically when you get a belt, it's going to have the part numbers. It's got a mark for the crank and the cams, so you can get your initial alignment in there, and then just kind of move on with your life. This belt doesn't have that. It came out of the package funny, and I just don't feel good using it. If I wouldn't use it on mine, I'm not going to use it on a customer's rig. So we went and got a different belt. A little bit of what I did while we were here is, and I'll just show you that belt. I'll just post a picture of it here real quick so you can see the so you see what it looks like. If you've ever seen a Toyota timing belt, you know what they look like. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I can obviously time a fucking vehicle without marks on the belt, but like I said, I just don't feel comfortable with this. I wouldn't use it on my rig. I'm not going to put it on a customer's rig, because like the long and short of this is, yeah, it might be good and fine, or it might blow a belt somewhere, right? I don't want my customer walking because of a bad decision. So basically what goes on, and you know, if you don't or can't get the Toyota stuff, customer went and got a Gates belt. I've had good luck using the stuff from O'Reilly's. They do a what's called an import direct series, and I've used several of their timing belt kits. It comes with the Mitsubishi belt, Bushi belt, or whatever, and good parts. Okay, so typically what you're going to find is, even though these are Toyota belts, they're a Mitsubishi belt, and they're going to always be marked like this. The drive belts aren't that big of a thing on Toyotas, but I've found on the GMs, because, you know, GM literally will have one model of vehicle with like 8 variations for that particular model year for no reason, just because they're assholes. Okay, so if you're dealing with a belt issue with a GM, especially a SERP belt, go to GM with your VIN, buy the spring tensioner and the belt. That is the solution. Okay. Or maybe it's not, because domestics suck ass. But anyway, where we're at right here is just a little bit of talking about this timing belt thing. So we got the timing marks on there. One thing that is going to make my life a little bit easier, I decided to do, was mark up the crank key. Like you can see, these are just a little bit of an indent mark here. And looking down in the vehicle bay, those can be a little bit hard to see, so I figured I went ahead and marked those up for me. It'll make my life a little bit easier, and whoever else needs to get in their neck. So with that said, just be smart about the parts that you buy and stuff, dude. There's so much bullshit out there anymore, and it's one of those things where, you know, like, I can just say this time and time and time and time again. Time is fucking money, okay? Time is always money. Time is the only currency that is non-replenishable. You'll never get your time back, okay? So every time myself and other techs are in the garage getting screwed around by shitty parts, we never get that time back. We never get that money back. But the jerk-off parts thieves and the parts guys, they got paid the same, okay? So just be smart about who you're buying shit from. It will make your life easier. You know what I mean? Like, you almost never like save money getting the good deal. I guess that's kind of the long and short of what I'm trying to say here. So with that being said, let's get this piece of shit back together and out of my life. Okay, when the crank pulley and stuff goes on, I just recommend you get in there and clean that out with a Scotch-Brite or something. I normally just like to keep these clean when they go in there. So that'll go on. All right, so where are we here? This belt shows you forward, right? It's also marked left and right, so those are going to be pretty self-explanatory. Belt is on. Now what we're going to do is just turn the motor over. Anytime you do a timing set, you need to rotate the motor and make sure that we get our timing marks come back to where they started. Obviously the marks on the belt aren't going to come back to where you started. I'm sure there's a math thing to that, but I don't know it. Alrighty, everything comes back to where it needs to go. Cranks back where it needs to go. At that point, we pull the grenade pin. We're tensioned. So, I don't know if you can see this. This is where your right crank mark came. So, I'm sure it's like 10 or 12 rotations or something. Everything comes back to where it's supposed to be. But that is the timing belt back on there. So that's done. I'm super good at forgetting this piece. Don't forget this piece. All right, this wiring harness back where it goes. All right, so crank bolt went on. We're just getting the idlers and everything on here, the fan, fan pulleys and fan clutch. So the crank pulley, not a big thing. Put it back on there. The torque is 184. Just use the chain wrench and a breaker bar to get it back together. I reluctantly put a little bit of blue Loctite on there. Alright, so the 1050 belt is the alternator belt, and the 1070 belt is the power steering belt. Okay, so I'm not 100% sure where I left off, but pretty sure you saw me get the timing belt on, got running the accessory stuff in there, and then I got the fans. So long story short is none of the drive belts that showed up were right either. Even though they are marked with the right size, none of them fit in their locations. So I was delayed by a little bit of a belt issue, and then I got that dealt with, got it all fired up, got the coolant in it, and ran it up to temp, which it ran, temped up fine, but I noticed it had a little bit of a leak. So I went ahead and pulled the thermostat out. Anyway, so pulled the thermostat out. I believe these are questionable parts too. This O-ring, you probably won't be able to see this, but there's like some ridging on there. That's not Toyota stuff. You can probably see that like that. Anyway, that's not Toyota stuff. This is the thermostat. I just kind of was slamming when I put that in there. This is not a Toyota thermostat. I'll show you the picture of the actual Toyota thermostat and the markings that went back in. So yeah, that's it. Basically, I put this back together, put the pressure on it. It's holding pressure. It's not leaking in the spot where it was leaking. So I can go ahead and fire it up and get it back out of here. I don't know, I know at the beginning of this I said this is like one of the easier jobs, and it really is one of the easier timing belt jobs. I don't know, the matrix has been kind of jerking me off lately. So what ended up going on was, for whatever reason, I don't know, like if you're familiar with these way the belts are sized, but typically when you're doing belt sizing, at least on Toyotas, it's like by this PK number is how I generally reference them. So these are the numbers on here, and you can see that one section says PK870, and that is the AC belt. So for some reason, these other brands of belts, I was able to get this one, the PK870. The other belts are the 1050 and the 1070. For some reason, Gates can get me a 1054, not a 1050. Apparently, they can get me a 1065, but not a 1070. So Gates' 1065 won't fit. I couldn't get it on there. I ended up having to put the customer stock belt back on there. So just be advised. The belts aren't exactly cheap. It's not like you're really saving any money trying to buy from O'Reilly's versus the dealer. Same thing with like oil filters and stuff. It's just not really worth it. So anyway, the long and short of this video, I guess, is these jobs are relatively easy to do. Having a holder for the crank and the cam pulleys makes your life go a lot better. And then just be careful when that stuff goes back together. So like I said, I ended up putting the customer's thermostat back in here. Like I said, I always preach I'm always going to preach OE Toyota thermostat. This kind of stuff is just not really worth it, and I'm 100% certain that shit-ass O-ring that came with that thermostat is what was causing the leak. traded it out with a different O-ring, put it back together, and now we're good to go. So, I mean, it's basically impossible to install that wrong. It just fits in the slot, and then the other piece goes over it. You can't like pinch it or anything, so it's not like it was an install problem. The long and short of this is it's just a timing belt. Okay, not to like put this off, but I did a timing belt for a lady one time that was 208,000 original miles on the original timing belt and water pump. Okay, these have a 90,000 mile recommended maintenance. What is it, like 90? Yeah, I don't know. 90,000 miles is going to be like 6, 7, 8 years on normal people's cars. So the other Forerunner is, I've read that one for 13, pushing 14 years now. Put about a little over 20,000 miles on it. Okay, so and that one's about time. It's got something under the cover that's kind of starting to make noise. I think the tensioner idler is starting to make a little bit of noise, so I'm gonna have to get in there and re-up all those parts. But yeah, questions, comments below. Hopefully you can take something away from this. All these jobs are the same, basically everything from 95.5 through 02, and even later on there's some Tundras, and yeah, even into the Tundra there's some 5V stuff, so they're a little bit different with the electronic throttle and stuff like that. But all the timing symptoms and all that stuff is going to be exactly the same going back and forth with this. And yeah, like I said, not super hard. And really, other than dealing with that, with actually getting the tensioner unit out from behind that AC thing, I think this job's super simple. Kind of like, I don't want to say beginner level because it's not, but it's like pretty, you know, kind of lower intermediate level as far as timing belt goes. It's not like you have to like jack the motor up and balance it and get shit out of the way like some of these other like transverse motors are. Can be a serious pain in the ass to work on, doing simple timing jobs and stuff like that. Or the Sienna van, for example, doing like a MZ timing belt back up underneath, though, those are a little more challenging as well. So yeah, 5E is pretty gravy as far as they go. So yeah, like I said, hopefully you can take something away from this. Appreciate you watching. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. Peace. Thank you.